Today's speaker in the La Trobe Innovation Series is Kate Burley, former Managing Director of Intel Australia and New Zealand, and now Country Manager of Amazon's Alexa skills across Australia and New Zealand. Kate's topic is Think Big or Go Home: Why Students and Businesses with a Global Mindset are more likely to succeed within the digital era. Now, Kate's presentation addresses the rise of platform economics and how this enabling technology, together with globalisation, are driving the current wave of digital innovation and disruption. She outlines how the proliferation of connectivity and the growing power of data and data analytics is lowering costs through the use of platforms, cloud-based processing, storage and tools. Kate talks about the proliferation of platform economy since the advent of hotspots, Wi-Fi, cloud computing technologies used by companies like YouTube, Amazon, Uber, Airbnb, Facebook and Netflix. What these firms and the next wave of Chinese technology firms such as Alibaba, Tencent and WeChat have in common is that they think globally, have monopolistic tendencies, that is, they become the standard, use artificial intelligence and are agile. For example, these companies have attached payment systems to their platforms, which give them a competitive advantage. Kate's challenge to our current generation of educators, students, startups and business leaders is to foster a global mindset and to better utilise and adapt platform technologies in order to be competitive and succeed more strongly. Please enjoy Kate Burley's presentation.
Thank you. Thanks very much, and thank you for that kind introduction. Antonio absolutely couldn't set up what I'm about to speak about more perfectly, so thank you for that, and I learned a lot. I've never heard of the canvassing, so I loved it. What is it? The lean canvas. So yeah, think big or go home. What I'm here to talk about is how do we foster a truly global mindset within ourselves and within our students and our educations and our politicians, etc., so that we can indeed work towards driving some more homegrown Australian businesses just like Antonio's that may one day take on the world. And my premise is that we really do need a much broader mindset than the mindset that we've all been brought up to have in Australia. So I want to share some of my learnings on that and then open it up for Q&A. And if I can have the 5 minutes at the end, that'd be good. So this is the agenda. This is what we're going to go through. I'll set the global landscape, talk a little bit about where we're at in Australia, then have a chat about how we can do it. And I'd love to hear your questions. Firstly, a little bit about me, because who am I anyway? I grew up in country Victoria, just outside of Ballarat, just to create a bit of affinity with the Victorian crowd here, and on a little country property. So I started small in a little rural country property in a rural town. Got to get a bit bigger as I moved to Sydney, probably just at the right age of teenage years when small country towns were looking a little bit small, and that opened my eyes obviously to a much bigger opportunity out there. I then lived in the US, and the reason why there's a picture of Prince there for any Prince fans is that I lived in Minnesota, the home of Prince and 3M. And I love travel and travel for work and play. That's me in Denmark at Billund at Legoland. And if you'd asked me for most of my life what my dream job would have been, it would have been being the managing director of Lego, which I've never achieved, but it's never too late, as they say. I studied humanities at Sydney University, as you've just heard. Wanted to save the world, as all good undergraduates typically want to do. And then moved across into electronics, because how could I not? The IT boom was just happening. We were all getting computers in our home, and it sounded like a great thing. For some reason, I ended up running the computer club at Dick Smith. I knew nothing about computers, but either did anyone else, so that was all right. And then eventually ended up landing a job at Intel, where I worked for 20 years. And I actually just stepped down from that role at Intel only a couple of months ago. So it's a pleasure to be here today, just putting my IT hat on after having quite a nice extended vacation. Why did I stay at Intel for so long, for 20 years? Well, you know what? Intel was top of the pops when I joined the company, and it still really underpins so much of the innovation that we're all talking about today when it comes to platform economics. This quote is what kept me there for so long. Andy Grove was one of the founding fathers. He wrote a book that was launched the year that I got there, which was called Only the Paranoid Survive. And you can read for yourself the general ethos that success breeds complacency, and only the paranoid survive. Complacency builds failure, only the paranoid survive. That's 20 years ago, and the paranoia, I would argue, has sped up even more, because time to market has got so much quicker, competition's got so much quicker. Even a company like Intel, really it was a startup back in the 1967 it was founded. It did not start in the microprocessor business. Microprocessors was a sideline business. It was actually a memory business, and someone invented the microprocessor, nice work. They put together a list of things of what you could possibly do with the microprocessor, and the interesting thing is the personal computer was not on that list. So they had built something that was brilliant, but they didn't know what people were going to do with it. And then the company's history really has been all around making a market for those products, which started personal computer, then moved to servers, which data centers run on today, and hence we have cloud computing. So, you can imagine it's been a pretty interesting place to work. It's a big, successful company, but let me tell you, you never have a day where you don't feel paranoid that tomorrow could be the day that the company just gets disrupted and someone does something better. So that paranoia is what I got to be grounded on for so long in my career. But of course, there's so many other great leading companies that are driving that. And I know we're going to hear about the fourth industrial revolution with the keynote speech that's following mine. But what I've got here is a really interesting diagram of this phase that we're all living in now. Every 100 to 150 years, there's an accelerated innovation wave, and we're in the middle of one now. You can see that hockey stick effect with the green line. The green line is measuring the number of users that are connected to the internet. And it's that connectivity to the internet that's driving the platform economies and the platform companies that really are dominating the world's economy today. And if you have a look at, the nice steady pace of change, and then suddenly you hit 2003, hotspots come into play, we all get Wi-Fi in our laptops, cloud computing becomes more accessible, and suddenly there's an explosion of new economy never thought of before businesses before. What drove the mindset of the people and the companies that have led those businesses? Let's have a chat about that. So they're the platform economies, and you would have heard a lot about platform economies. I've had a crack at defining them. Platforms are infrastructures that third parties, including consumers or businesses, that can innovate on top of. And I've listed some of those platforms there. Uber is not a technology company, it's a transportation company. Airbnb, an accommodation platform. YouTube, a video media platform. Facebook, a social media platform. Amazon, a retail platform. Netflix, an entertainment platform. These are all companies that didn't exist just a few years ago, but they are now dominating the world. And the new leaders, when you look at some of the ones I've listed here, they're all platform companies. They've all invented something that we want to live on, be on, develop on. Antonio's company is very much a platform company for trading produce on, right? So this is how we've got to think. But for your platform to be successful, it's no use just saying, I just want to be the biggest platform in Australia. It's just not going to work. Look at these companies, they're all thinking big and they're thinking global. I've listed a few others because we often hear about the US-based companies, but of course China has just come up so fast with Tencent, Alibaba, Xiaomi, Baidu. They are leading, in fact, the universal platform because what they have attached to their core value propositions is payment systems. Facebook's not there yet on payment systems. Google's not there yet. They all want to get there. It's hard. They've got different regulatory environments to work in, different privacy regulations, all sorts of things. But the point is, technically, these Chinese companies are proving that payment systems can be attached. Why do I need a credit card after that if I trust my social media platform on my identity and with my payments better? That just becomes another reason why I'm there constantly. So there's all of these companies that are in this race to who can be the most dominant and pervasive platform within our lives. Okay. So thinking it needs a processor upgrade. So, okay, so let's have a look at those top 20 largest companies, some of who I've just moved. This is from Fortune. And if you take a look at it, Apple, Alphabet, which is Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and then Facebook are all dominating them. These are new economy companies, all driven on platforms, all that didn't exist before. And they are all digitally and globally led. None of them are just looking for their country that they were founded in as their only reason for being. If we look at the top 500 companies in the world, this is from Fortune Top 500. I had a dig on Australia. Where do we sit? It's kind of depressing, right? It really is. I mean, like, we are dominated by, we've got companies in the top 500. They're very successful companies, but they're all old world companies. They're retailers, telcos, and the banks. And a caveat on mining, of course, we have mining, but they're not listed here. They've got dual listings, so they don't show up on the Fortune thing, but we know they're mining, but they're still old world. They're not platforms. They haven't done anything new. They haven't revolutionised the way we interact with them. They're big and successful, and they're the incumbents, and they are at risk. So what do they all have in common, these very successful platform companies? Well, firstly, they think and act globally. We talked about that, scaling very fast to other nations. They actually scale three times faster than any other cohort within their cohort. So the speed to market is unbelievable. They have what you call naturalistic, monopolistic tendencies. And by that, what I mean is if you can define the standard, then you become the de facto standard, which allows you to really dominate fast. So Intel's a little bit like that in PCs. People often say to me, why doesn't Intel just launch a PC? Well, why would you launch a PC when everyone else is putting your chip inside? You don't need to launch the PC. We became the de facto standard. Intel is not the de facto standard in smartphones. Missed that wave. It's a big issue for the company, right? You know, for them to have missed that wave. And now there's another processor that's a de facto standard within smartphones that arguably are now the centre of our lives compared to PCs. So you can have it, but someone else can redefine what that may be. So, you know, it's interesting, but naturalistic, monopolistic tendencies, you need it because you need the scale to become the platform of choice. Hence, you end up with this quasi-standardisation that I measured before. And it's important to notice that first mover doesn't necessarily mean you win the standard. And we all know the VHS beta sort of thing, right? Who sets up their channels, who gets everyone gravitating around their platform first, they're the winners in the end. So it's not necessarily first to market, it's who did the best at becoming the platform of choice. Okay, increasingly all of these platforms are dependent on artificial intelligence, learning algorithms that allows them to predict what's happening next before we can all think of it. And they have long-term vision, and this is really, really important. Long-term vision, but also while executing flawlessly on the short-term scale. And that's a really hard thing to do, and it's a different psyche that you need that says, here's my vision for where I want to be in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, but right now, I can't miss this quarter. I have to deliver on what I've promised about today. And we heard a little bit of that from Antonio about building up that credibility through the small wins while you're aiming for the big goal at the end. They never stop innovating, and they're innovating for you so that you feel like what they've done, you can't live without. Okay, so in short, they think big, they think globally, while they're laser focused on delivering value that feels like it's tailored for exactly what you need. The common traits of the mindset, what does it take really for these companies, is that they think and dream big. They move with unbelievable speed. So think of those Australian companies that I mentioned before. I don't think that they're moving with that sort of speed, right? They're doing what they've done really well, and they've become very good at doing what they know how to do, but the speed isn't there. So if I was an educator, or if I'm speaking to other businesses, it's like, how do you build more speed and energy into what you're trying to do, because you're going to be left behind. So speed is critical for Australia. Innovate, partner and acquire. So the arrogance or the hubris of, oh, you know, I've got great engineers, I could do that better myself. Platform companies don't think like that. You know, when Facebook saw, Instagram come along, they didn't sit there and go, oh, well, we could do that better. Let's just do it. screw Instagram. They said, my God, they beat us to the punch. They're a de facto mobile standard. Facebook at that time was really good on computers, on PCs, but it wasn't a great experience. Instagram came along. They just said, let's go and buy it. We will acquire it. I'm not arrogant enough to think that I can do that. They've done it first. I'll recognise it, I'll acquire it. The ability to recognise when other people have beaten you to the punch is very critical in this space. The ability to partner cannot be underestimated. How do I partner? Alexa, Amazon's Alexa, they've just done a partnership deal with Cortana, which is Microsoft's artificial intelligence platform. They're now sharing IP so that they can both work out how they propel their solutions further. A lot of the time in this space we talk about their frenemies, right? They'll compete like crazy on one hand, but on the other hand they'll recognise we're better together. Let's work out how we can partner. And the legals get in and work it all out, you know. But I mean, it's amazing that partnership, acquisition and innovation, they all need to move together. Know when it's time for you to do it versus someone else, and recognising that. Scanning the world, never just look in your own backyard. For a country where we all travel so much as a pastime, and we're so connected and we're so culturally integrated with many different nations, it does amaze me how often I do hear Australian developers stand up and say, oh, this has never been done before. And I'll sit there and think, yes, it has. Haven't you been to China? This is happening already. Or you'll hear our politicians say, this is world beating. And you'll sit there going, no, it's not. This is 10 years old. So we, as much as it pains me to say as an Aussie, need to stop being delusional and stop saying it's world beating or it's never been done before, and recognise there's plenty of great innovation happening all around us. You probably won't see it, but really you should try a lot harder to understand what's out there already before you go down that path, and unfortunately will be disappointed when you discover that you haven't really done anything unique. So scanning the world, don't be encumbered by borders, geography, language. When you're inventing, it shouldn't just be this is going to be great in Melbourne or this is going to be great in Sydney. Who else is your product or your platform going to be fantastic for? Think big from the outset. Don't wait to be discovered. It just doesn't work that way. And competition and opportunity is global. It can come from anywhere. And I mentioned before that planning and acting for long-term growth. So these are some of the traits in the global mindset that I think are really important for us all to take on board. What can we do better? And I've touched on a few of these. Definitely thinking much bigger, acting more global from the outset, capitalising on both the US proximity, language similarities, but also that proximity to Asia. And I mentioned, you know, those amazing Asian platforms that are coming out of nowhere, right? How does Australia sort of pivot between both and scan both markets to understand where our true competition and opportunity lies? Work and recruit, I can't emphasise this enough. Internationally, exchange programs, acquisitions are often some of the best things because it allows you to bring in new blood, new cultural nuances into your business as well, and embrace it. Don't try and smash it down to your existing culture, but let it flourish and understand that that is part of what you acquired as well, not just a great IP. Engage and promote millennials, digital natives, diversity. The more crazy and creative the teams are, the more you've got opportunities for people to come forward with ideas that weren't as obvious. Unfortunately, we're all guilty of hiring people who seem just like us, and that really doesn't create a culture for innovation. When you think about it, it's kind of pretty obvious, but we all fall into that same trap, so we all must strive harder to break through some of those stereotypes. And then finally, data science, coding, computer engineering, artificial intelligence. These are what we need to be studying. We need to be encouraging our kids to study. I failed dismally. I think that my daughter, who's doing the HSC at the moment, is going to go and do an arts degree and go to a big sandstone university and study English, but whatever. I'll leave it up to the rest of you to do a better job than I have. But the key is that if you don't understand how or why, it's very hard to totally get to the end goal of what the idea is. I'm not saying it can't be done, but gee, it helps if you understand where the technology is to really start thinking in terms of digital first and the platform economics that it can bring to life. And finally, innovation needs execution. And we hear often about, how Australia is we're great at innovating, but not so great at commercialising. I think we're getting better, but it comes down to execution. Let's not just be the people who had the great idea and someone else went and executed and brought it home. Let's have the idea and bring it home as well. So finally, creating pathways for our best and brightest to tap into this global mindset is up to all of us. In any way we can do that, and it's fantastic that so many people here today, tapping in with this great conference over the next day and a half. But really, it really does start with us. It starts with a broader global mindset. We can't rely on our politicians to do it. They're going to be much more short-term focused than any of us need to be to succeed in this space. So let's just get out there and do it ourselves. Thank you very much.